This next project is a really great way of drumming in your techniques and making sure you've got absolute control over your carving tools. We're going to create a length of berry moulding. The great thing with this project is you can literally see yourself improve with each cut that you make. To begin with, you need a length of moulding with dimensions as follows.
Now this type of decoration has been used throughout the centuries. Here you can see an example on this neoclassical capital in England. And a row of full berries has been used on this capital, which has been carved from timber. The decoration is used on furniture, as you can see here, just above the leg on this rather ornate table. And you can see how I've used the ornament to decorate this turned bowl of fruit. Now this is a great decoration for turnings, as you can see here on this candlestick project.
Now I've raised the height of my bench by just chucking a couple of lumps of timber underneath, and what this does is it means that the carving work is going to be about the same height as my elbow when standing nice and tall. That'll stop me hurting my back. You want to try and create your moulding on a plank of timber, and that can be more easily held in your vise for carving. On completion of the moulding, we'll just simply rip it down to size on a circular saw.
This moulding can easily be formed with a router, or if you're into traditional hand tools, then you can use an astragal moulding cutter. Now after you've formed your moulding, your next step is to scribe a line where the cut will be required to separate the moulding from the plank. So let's make this between 2 to 3 millimeters below the shoulder.
Now select your 7mm gouge and set in a circle just on a scrap piece of timber. So remember, hold it in the pinch position, make sure you anchor, and just simply set in a circle which is formed by the chisel's curve. Then with a pair of dividers, set the points at the widest diameter of the circle that you've just made. Actually pop the points in the cut, and that should be about 9mm. Then mark a series of divisions along the upper ridge line of the moulding. Can you see what I'm doing? Okay, so now with your skew chisel, what we're going to do is create dividing lines where you've created these points. So with the heel of the skew, rest it on the shoulder and roll it over through your marking line over to the next shoulder. Be very careful that you don't mark the shoulder. You're only creating a dividing line on that long astragal section, on the long sausage that you've just made. You want to make sure that those cuts are in a 90-degree angle to your shoulder, if you know what I mean. So what I'm saying is try and make sure that your cuts are 90 degrees to the moulding, not skew with. So you want them nice and straight. So eventually with this sort of moulding you get in a bit of a rhythm, and as apprentices we had so much of this stuff to do you wouldn't even think about what you were doing. You'd just get in a natural rhythm, and that was really where those techniques would truly become second nature, and I think that's what we're trying to achieve. So now I'm just going to go over these sections, make sure that they're all mostly about 90 degrees. Just probably set them in a little deeper. Okay, so now we're going to select our 7mm gouge, and we're going to create the first half of the berries along the moulding. So hold it in the fist position, actually invert the chisel so that the convex part is facing uppermost. Make sure you anchor. Place the concave part around halfway along the first division, and I'm going to motivate the chisel forward, but as I do I'm going to lift the handle of the chisel just like that, you see? And so again, halfway through, motivate the chisel forward and lift the handle as you go. And the idea is that you get in the habit or with each repetition, the objective is that you form a perfectly round berry in one fluid cut, in one single motion. Through repetition, you're able to form a perfectly round berry. Now, I haven't done this for years, so it's going to take me a while too. But as you get into the rhythm of it, you slowly start to be able to create this perfect berry with each cut. So this is in some respects why we call this project a PMP project, a practice makes perfect. All it is pure repetition. And what you don't want to do is slice it directly down at a 45-degree angle, because then you're going to take off the rounded part of your berry. It's got to be a nice rounded shape. Okay, so now what we're going to do is exactly the same, but with the opposite hand. Again, it really drums in those techniques. So, fist position, make sure you anchor, locate the concave part of the chisel on the centre part of the division, and just gently roll it over. Look how I slightly slide that chisel. See how I'm sort of wriggling it? You see? Just makes life so much easier. I'm not putting any pressure on that cut. In fact, it's a really polished cut, which tells me I've got a really sharp chisel. Now, each of these cuts is by far not perfect. But I'm not worried, I'm just completing each cut. I just want to get into a rhythm, because we're going to go over and correct it later anyway. Okay? Done. Ready for the next step. So let's just have a look what we've got so far. It's not great, it's fairly rough, but the important points are, at least where the two berries come together, they're meeting each other higher than the shoulder. In other words, they've not dived down and there's going to be a gap between them. We don't want that. We want, when the berries come together, we want them to meet perfectly at its outer diameter. We're just going to go over the whole thing and just tidy it up. We're going to focus on each berry, spend a little bit of time, make sure it's perfectly round. The first step is by going across the grain. Let me show you here. Establish the side profile of the berry. And this is where it's so important. Do you remember I talked about those tips on the chisel blade when we were sharpening? Why it was important to keep them nice and intact? If they were rounded over, when doing this sort of work, you wouldn't be able to get that definition where you really need it. Now with the askew chisel, what we need to do is start removing some of the waste between the berries, very gently using the heel. Just ease it in, and hopefully you've cut down deep enough with your gouge so that the waste just pops out. Can you see that? What you didn't want to do though, you don't want to set in too deep, because what we don't want to, oh, look at that. Might just made a mistake. What you don't want to do is have big setting cuts. You really just want it to be nice and neat. So just gently as you go. So that's enough for there. So now we're going to do the opposite side. Okay, so now after we've cleared the waste with a skew chisel, you can see a little bit more how those berries are forming. What we don't want is any spaces between the berries. Oh, it's still far from finished, but you can start to see that there's some definition forming. We're really losing all the splinters which are between the berries. The shape of the berries are completely round. Their tips are touching each other. So the next step, you go along the entire length and you try and perfect that uniformity of the moulding. If it were being polished, you might get a little bit of sandpaper just to soften the edges. What we don't want to do is start losing the definition. So then with a soft bristle brush, you could just give it a bit of a scrub, remove any of those loose splinters that's still hanging on, and it would almost burnish the surface too, give it a bit of a polish. Now on completion, you're going to end up with something looking a bit like this. So here you've got a few different variations too that you can try.